Thank you for that lovely introduction. And thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak here today. My name is, Glen Holmes. So, as I was introduced there, I'm a principal product manager at a small startup you might have heard of called Amazon. I've been there about a year and a half. I've previously in Workday, previously in sales methodology software. I worked in finance. I've worked across numerous industries as a product manager. And I also, so there might be a certain academic slant to this presentation because I do lecture in National College of Ireland in emerging technologies and business analysis. So irrationality, something that permeates and affects every decision you will make as a product manager. It defines how customers perceive our product, the value they attribute to it, not that we present. It attributes how you price your product, how you go to market. Every single decision you made is bounded with irrationality. Now, as product managers, we would say, no, right? We're rational. Our job is to take the chaos, the madness of software development and bring sanity to that. Bring logic, bring rationality. Now, if that were the case, there would be no one here today. So why are we in a room with COVID's kind of still going, it's spiking? We're sitting beside one another, right? We came here today, we got on buses, cars, walked, right? It's nice now, it's a pretty bad morning, right? Organising this event, you had to put on a room, had to feed people, lots of coffee, pay for the room, obviously, insurance, etc. If you weigh up those logical arguments, rationality, it's much better if we were at home, wouldn't it? Looking at a screen, coming down, putting your feet up, not having to get dressed in your pajamas. You're in this seat here and you're like, this Glen fella's talking about irrationality. Oh God, like I want to tune out. But you kind of feel bad walking all the way back, you know, and leave me, right? They are rational things. But there's something esoteric, something intrinsic that we know that being here is better. I prefer doing it. Being in person just is better. If you're rationalizing it, you're weighing up those data points, pros and cons, don't tend to stack up. And that happens a lot throughout the product management process. So this is one of the quotes I love from a guy called Rory Sutherland. Now I'm going to talk about people like Rory Sutherland, if anyone's heard of him. He's an advertising guy, but kind of behavioral economist. Other behavioral economists like Dan Ariely, Daniel Kahneman, and Amos Tversky, if you've read Thinking Fast and Slow. Now I am not, that's just a caveat, I am not an anthropologist, a social psychologist, any of those things. I just have an interest in it, and I have an interest in human people as product managers, humans, as product managers should have. And it was Friedrich Nietzsche, we all know Nietzsche, he says, the irrationality of a thing is no argument against its existence. It is actually a condition of it. So he found that everything in the world is irrational. But as Dan Ariely, if anyone's read Predictably Irrational's book, states, as in the title of his book, we are predictably irrational, and we can actually understand the irrationality of people to build better products. But I see so many times where we have a logical fallacy. We take a framework and we say, if we input A, Z will come out. And that's not how generally product management happens. When we talk about this, about how we can actually, by understanding irrationality and just kind of acknowledging its existence, we can build better products. Okay, and the fundamental things that we think much less than we think. Okay, our decision making is generally, if anyone's read Thinking Fast and Slow, it is generally fast thinking. And most of the people we deal with think the same way. We like to think we sit down and we take our analysis and we look at our pros and cons and our return on investment, right? Because that's what we do as product managers. We're very sensible people. But we actually make decisions often with little context or based on context. And often we make them quite quick and we don't think as much as we think. Okay? So I'm going to start with a little kind of question to you, okay? So it's like a little, let's think about this as a kind of a situation, right? Is everyone here product design, product management in that space, yeah? So if I asked you to be a product manager of a soft drink company, competing with Coca-Cola, what attributes would you think of your product do you think you'd have to focus on to compete with Coke? An example I might give you, simple one, would be taste, right? If you compete with Coke, you think, I'm going to make my product taste better. Anything else you might think of? Price, right? You've got to compete on price. Coke, obvious. Anything else? Package, variations, right? Coke do bottles and cans and things and had the branding and stuff. You can think about that, right? You might think about, there's a number of different things you could think of, but they're like, they're standard attributes, okay? Anyone want to tell me the most popular soft drink in the world? Hint, it's not Coca-Cola. Anyone? No, soft drink. Gives you wings, right? Attributes of Red Bull, okay? Can size, might give more. 330 milliliter can size Coke, generally standard. They do 250 milliliters, but generally it's 300. Red Bull, 250 milliliters. So you get less. Price point, 135, that's Tesco pricing. And it was 160 for Red Bull. So you're actually getting, not only are you paying more for less, it's per milliliter, the price is high. Variations, packaging, you might talk. You get cans, bottles of Coke, you get different size bottles, you get glass bottles. Red Bull, you get a can. That's it. They don't do anything else. Taste, highly rated. Now, that is not a subjective opinion, as funny as that may seem. When Red Bull product managers went out and did their taste test on Red Bull, it was the worst performing taste test they had ever done on any soft drink. That's a quote that came back. Tastes like piss. That is genuine. So, how does this succeed? Rational factors. All the data suggested do not do this. Right there. But what the interesting thing that came back with the data, so if Red Bull product managers had just looked at the data, came back, they would have said, nah, it's not a goer. Some interesting things came back when they asked people, like, why do you drink Coke? What's the thing for them? What a lot came back was that they wanted a sugar rush. That was the thing that they wanted with Coke. Taste was actually a secondary thing, right? If it tastes good, it's great. But at 3 o'clock in the day, I'm feeling tired, I want a sugar rush. And they said, well, caffeine's better than sugar. So actually, the stuff that tasted really bad, they made worse because they added more caffeine, which actually really kind of started diluting it, making it taste worse. What it did is it gave people that fundamental need, fundamental want of the prize was that they wanted to actually a bit of energy. Okay? And then they went, well, why do you want more energy? Why? What's it like in work? He said, well, I'm competing with other people in work. I want to be able to be more productive than those people. Or I have a hobby and I want to be better. I cycle. Oh, I'm going to take Red Bull and it gives me wings. So they wanted to be to that little bit of extra performance. So what they say is, well, if you're drinking stuff that's just caffeinated, but it's the same as everything else, right? Cost the same, volume's the same, that might not be appealing. So they used what they call the exclusivity heuristic. They made it seem like an exclusive thing, an expensive product. So because you're competing, remember, the fundamental things that they were competing against other people, but they're also competing on brand. You're drinking Coke, everyone drinks Coke. I drink this, right? This low Red Bull that costs more, it seems more. They played into a lot of the insecurities of people by understanding the actual irrational desires of people, right? And then they came with Red Bull and is now basically the most popular soft drink in the world. So what do you learn? Like, how do you kind of apply this? The thing is, and I see this happen an awful lot. I work for AWS, right? We are data driven. We've data, that's Amazon, right? But be careful of the data. And even in Amazon, this is something that we are very, very conscious of, right? There's a saying that, like, I think it comes from a different saying, but I say product managers use data the way a drunk uses a lamppost, right? For support and not illumination, right? So you've got to look at your data to inform you, to understand where you look into, and not to just always validate a hypothesis, right? Wrongly or rightly, the validation of that would invalidate the hypothesis of Red Bull. They would have said, no, we don't do this. But understanding and digging deep and actually having conversations, you cannot have a conversation with data. It doesn't answer you back, right? Use it to inform you, right? Because data is very logical. It's yes, no, it's binary kind of in its ways, right? But as you dig more into it, you actually see the contradictions in things, the irrationalities that actually come up from having conversations. It helps you to inform, sure it does, and use it extensively, but use it wisely. And that is one thing, really kind of the lesson, because data is rational and human beings aren't. okay? So just be careful. Like, this is something that really where rationality really, really kicks in, and I do a lot of pricing, right? And it doesn't matter even if you don't do pricing, actually. I'll talk about that in a moment. Even if you give stuff away for free in your product, pricing is where rationality really comes out, right? So if anyone's ever seen this before, it's The Economist, from The Economist. It's about the early 2000s, mid-2000s when you were doing it online was becoming big. And they had your online subscription was $59, your print subscription $125, print and web $125. Lots of people saw that and went, that's a mistake, right? Print is $125, and print, why? But it was intentional. Now, with this pricing model, subscriptions generally ran at 16% of people went with 59%, and 84 went for the 125. You know, that seemed kind of normal or rational. You think like you're getting a bigger bundle for that price. So Dan Ariely, who wrote Predictably Irrational, ran a test with this. He teaches at Harvard. He took 100 Harvard students, and he put this in front of them, and he said, if you're spending money, what would you choose? And it ran out almost identical. I think it was 17% took the 59 and 83 the 125. And then he had a variation of this. He took another cohort of 100 Harvard students, and he removed the middle option. Okay? And he gave them these two options. What do you think happened? Flipped, of course. Went 68% to 32. Right? And what you learn from that is that people are enamored by free things regardless if they need them or not. Free works so well. It really does. The anchoring pricing of 125, that was absolutely deliberate as a concept, because it drove people towards thinking, I'm getting print for free, or I'm getting, subscription for free. Works for me. So think about this in your product. I see a lot of people having products and then they build an add-on product or an add-on feature and they charge for it. Right? Maybe you don't get adoption. Sometimes it's better to raise the price of your core product and include that free add-on feature for free. Right? Sometimes, sounding nefarious, it's good even if you're going to give something away for free, put a nominal price in it and use it as a method of attracting customers by giving it them for free. So say it costs money, and then go, but if you adopt our core product, we'll include this. Now, it might seem nefarious and a bit manipulative, but it helps with adoption. Pricing is so irrational. Our people's value perception is so irrational. People will actually, billionaires will use coupons, discount coupons. They will. Your biggest customers with highest revenue, they will ask for bigger discounts than anybody else. They'll push it down, they want. Even though they're the ones with the most money. It doesn't equate that, people have loads of money, why do they care? Free is a huge motivator for people. And also, testing your pricing. I see this happen, I see this from very rarely. A/B testing your pricing. Okay? Going out with customers, validating your pricing model. And it's really hard, because if you put price in front of the customers, would you pay this? They probably, yeah, and again, yeah. There's no rational kind of thinking behind it. If you actually go out and methods of A/B testing your product, and I can talk about that later. But it ends up actually coming out with some really, really interesting data about, so you can do your sensitivity analysis and all that, but actually putting figures in front of people and seeing what you pay for it. And putting anchoring pricing and having free bundles and how you package your product is incredibly, incredibly important motivator for adoption. Okay, so lesson 2 is A/B test your pricing and incentivize your customers with free stuff. People love free stuff, honestly. But that's just customers, right? Because our bosses, our executives, of course, our stakeholders, they're, very, very, academically well-achieving people maybe. They've been worked their way up the ladder for years. They're really intelligent people and very, very rational. Everything's kind of, we're going to look at this and we're going to analyze it deeply. And I'll give you a story. About 10, 12 years ago, I was working on as a product manager for a company. And it's probably what happened almost to everyone in this room, I'm sure this happened too, where our CEO comes in and goes, got something for you. Got this. Winner. And they say, go and build that. And our CEO, and I can't really divulge too much because I'd be sued, but basically he came in with this product and told us that it was an offline version of our current product. He wanted us to build an offline version because in the market the customer wanted, the connectivity wasn't great, right? Wi-Fi connectivity wasn't great. And this wasn't like 20 years, this was 10 years ago. So of course I came in, I was like, no, we're not doing that. This is going to take like 10 months. It's going to take 2/3 of our engineering team. This is just bizarre. So I went off, and I generally did probably some of the best research ever did. I went and like really got deep, and I looked at like investment strategies and infrastructure in the region. It was one of the biggest 5G at the time investments in the region. I looked at government compliance for buildings over a certain square footage that had to have Wi-Fi and all, and had to have a certain level of Wi-Fi. All of this in the region, did massive amounts of time. Put it all together, had a meeting with the CEO and other stakeholders, C-level, and I kind of went, here we go, and this is what we do. If we build it in a year, all that customers' problems are going to be fixed. The product is obsolete. They're going to spend money. We're wasting all our time. All these rational things. We're the 2/3 of our engineering team. We're not giving to the other customers. All the product management team did this brilliant presentation. Went, there we go. And the CEO went, Glen, that's amazing. You've done that's really strong research, and I commend you. Actually, what was I thinking? I was an idiot. How could I even have asked you to do that? We're definitely not building that. No, that actually didn't happen. Sorry, I'm thinking something else. What happened? The first part, he actually did say, it's really interesting research. They're really investing that. The Palapa Ring project, that's interesting, that infrastructure. When can we have it? So I was devastated. I was like, oh my God, how? Like, it was plain as the nose in your face that this data just, nothing added up. And this was a rational, intelligent, what you would deem a rational and intelligent person demanding this of me. And I'll come back to it in a moment. I'll just go on a little bit more what happened. Because you'd say that irrationality is everywhere. Okay? So there are 100 people, 80 to 100 people in this room at the moment. Probably one of us will end up in prison. So, chances are. And if you take nothing from this talk, which you probably won't, take one thing. If you're going for parole, do not go before lunch, right before lunch. Seriously, statistically, you have a much better chance of getting paroled after lunch, directly after lunch, than just before lunch. Because judges get hangry, right? That's a physiological thing that happens to everybody that affects your decision making. The most objective profession in the world, pure evidence-based, no outside influences. The judge is disinterested, unbiased. Yet that can affect them. Statistically affects your chances. It happens to everyone, right? The colleague type represents is that an energy company in Britain, in the 2000s, or maybe actually even more recent, were giving, they had a prize, an offering of £1,000 off your electricity, or your energy bill. Now today that would be, well, it probably wouldn't mean much nowadays, but it was £1,000 off your energy bill, and they had 67,000 entries into that competition. Now, at the same time, they were running an advertising campaign that had a cute, fluffy penguin in it, right? They ran a competition to win the cute, fluffy, cute, cuddly toy of the penguin. They had 367,000 entries into that. In fact, one person who won the toy as an experiment, they said, we'll give you £200 off your electricity bill. And he said, no, I want the toy. So, like I said, I'm an academic at heart. So you can take like David Ricardo and the, comparative advantage. You can take John Maynard Keynes with your, theory of employment and theory of money. But fundamentally, if you want to do well, have advertisement with a fluffy toy in it, and your product will sell. But you imagine going to your executives and going, I know what's going to really, really grow revenue here. What? Advertisement with this, you'd be laughed out of the room. Because we tend to believe that, no, it's rational, it can't be, there's a supply and demand curve, there's a sensitivity analysis, and pricing, and all these type of things. When fundamentally, people will make decisions based on the most random of things. Okay? So, to come back to my boss, the CEO, what I was naive in at the time, and thank you, I've learned for that, is that I was thinking about like customers' needs, and this is what the customer really needs, and we get down to first principles, and wasting, and this is the organization. But what I don't understand, it's not really always about customer needs, and that's like blasphemous as a product manager, right? It's always about the customer's needs. And it's not, it's about anxieties too. What is making your customers, what's making your boss anxious? Why was a rational person telling me to do this? And I never found that out. And that's something that you really knew. What impacts your boss's boss? Because what was happening was that his mandate, he was the CEO of our company. We were part of a larger group. His shareholders his boss even, other people were demanding that they grow into new regions. That was part of his basically objective for the year. Grow new regions, right? Particularly Asia Pacific. Got that region, and we need to launch, and we need to basically get into that market. So his basically whole premise: I don't care. I don't care about anything else. That's what I need to do. And that was the context of what influenced him, or what the anxieties he had, were influencing our product decisions. And I didn't realize that. And only when I found that out subsequently, so I couldn't understand why he's doing this. And I had conversations then with the other C-level execs who I had good relations with. And they were saying, you're under pressure to get into Asia. And I was like, okay. So I started to kind of understand a little bit more about the use case and what it is. Long story was actually, we were able to actually, take away our good principles of product management and do this one thing for the customer, but not exactly what they wanted. We went down and gave them a very, very shrunk down version of what they want. That didn't actually cost them much, and we outsourced the development. And we got into the market. We actually ended up being a good kind of decision to make to enter that market, because it opened doorways for us. But we had to do it. But I didn't understand. I was so naive. I thought my logical argument, my brilliant analysis was going to change. It was like a courtroom drama, like everyone, oh, brilliant. That's not what happens. There's so many conflicting anxieties that happen here. So you've got to understand what is impacting your customer, right, for needs, their anxieties. People might be buying your product because they just have budget. They might be buying your project because they basically want to get promoted and they want to be seen to be bringing this new technology into your company. So understand the buying decision, right? The anxieties of buying decisions as well. So understand context. What motivates key decision makers, such as execs and buyers, and make sure your product eases their anxieties. But think about anxieties as well as needs. And I know sometimes they're very interchangeable, but you really, really understand what are the pressures that are getting on this. Okay, so I'm going to give you a time series, and I'm going to ask you another question. So this is a time series of a street in Dublin. It's not clicking. So this is January 2020. Okay, move on. February 2020. You see March, something's happening in March. April's pretty, not much happening. May, we see something happening. Following to June, something else on that street is happening. We go into July, 2 more, and then finally we end with August. And guess what that is, plotting? No? Renovations, planning applications. So that data is you can get from the planning authority. When this is a product, and I'm going to move on to next slide to explain this. So these are my twin boys, Adam and Alex. Yeah. But the thing, and what's happening here is a process called mimesis. Okay? So we get this when we're born. We're born with this as a human, so it's called mimesis. And what it is, so when people used to come and visit the boys, they bring them toys. And they might bring them 2 motor cars, one green, one blue. And they'd fight over the green car, and then they'd fight over the blue car. So I started saying to my family and friends, I really appreciate it, but if you're coming and getting a present, get them 2 of the same thing, right? They won't fight because they get 2 of the same thing. No. They've got 2 Thomases. But this is what they do. Because going back to the planning applications, mimesis is kind of keeping up with the Joneses, right? When we see things happening, like planning application, renovation on a road, right? They're actually planning applications, not renovations. Planning applications for renovations. You will find on that street, and you can follow this data, it's available publicly from the planning application. You can see where on that road, I can guarantee you in the next couple of months, you'll have planning application, planning application, and planning application. New car in a driveway. See new car in a driveway? Guarantee on that road, there'll be new cars in that driveway. If anyone knows anybody who sells cars, best thing you can do when somebody buys a car from you is get their address and go and knock on doors on that road. And say, your neighbour, we've sold your neighbour a new car. And you're like, did you? A new car? That is mimesis, right? We fundamentally want, even if we don't need it, we fundamentally want what others have. And that's very powerful in product management. But it's kind of powerful if you break probably one of the principles, which is we don't do one thing for one customer. And I espouse this, right? We build for markets. We build for the greater good. We maximize the utility and things like that. But, that's a bad word. Sometimes you have an influential customer. You have somebody at startup scale, right? You have an influential customer that wants you to do one thing. Now, all the literature will say, don't do the low-hanging fruit. okay? That only impacts your roadmap, it affects, and I agree to an extent, but if you've got a customer who you can build a relationship with, by doing something small for them, in return for maybe a testimonial, maybe get on a webinar with me and talk about that, I can guarantee you that that will help with your product revenue because it'll make it viral. Because if one influential customer is using your product, I can guarantee you their competitors will go, why are they using that product? Why are we not using that product? Has anyone looked at this product? Why are you not doing that? That's what happens. Mimesis kicks in. So I'm not saying take your home, and like contrary to what I said, I didn't want to do it for the customer in Southeast Asia. I want to go and build this offline thing for them, right? And waste 2/3 of our engineering. But there's a context to it. If it's value, because remember, as product managers, right, we're the architects of competitive advantage, right? ROI is the biggest thing, return on investment. So you might think this small little thing, and it contradicts your product principles, right, of not doing for one customer. But if the return on investment of that means that doing that small thing, even if it's used by that one customer we shouldn't do, can drive revenue or sales, it may be worth doing. Now, I know you've got to support it and all those things, and I'm not oblivious to the badness of doing things like that, but sometimes that's right. And what's even better, if you are building a feature or a new product, right? And even if you're going to charge it, if you have an influential customer, or even you can find one that's not using your product, give it to them for free. Say, go ahead, use it. Ask them, can you reference them? Some people won't like references, some people do. Even if they don't, there's always a word of mouth. There's always a grapevine. Somebody is using something, okay? And that, I can guarantee you, will initiate mimesis. And other influential customers or potential customers will start to want to adopt your product, okay? Or your Thomas the Tank Engine. So people want what others have, lesson 4, okay? Sometimes doing the one thing for one influential customer is actually valuable. I'm not suggesting you take every single customer's one single weird request and do it all, at all. Stick to your principles. But think about it, okay? How can you, because remember, it's ROI, return on investment is what you want. So this is how we manage for irrationality, okay? Product managers, we need to be anthropologists, social psychologists, and behavioral economists. What I would suggest, really, really study the principles in the heuristics, because understanding people helps you understand product. You know, I talk about data and that we do a survey, we get customer feedback. How many times you customer feedback? So I did a webinar or I did a workshop and I got customer feedback. Customers will say a lot that they don't mean. People say a lot that they don't mean. Actions. So experiment. Okay, experiments, right? So what are people doing? What are people feeling? What are people adopting? Why are they not? Things like that. Because people say, yeah, that's brilliant. Oh, that's the best feature I've ever seen in my life. Never use it. Right? Happens as all. Right? So basically experiment. Use your data wisely, but not exclusively. As I said, you can have conversations. Understand the needs and anxieties. Right? What basically motivates your customer, your boss's boss? What troubles them? And sometimes maybe that edge case can be a good thing. It's not always a bad thing to do the odd edge case for customers. That quote will follow me. And ultimately, really what it is to build a good product, you need to think rationally. But to build a great product, you need to think irrationally. So that's me today. I'll sum up. I hope that you've gotten something. You've probably, I hope trying to think, you can disagree with me. Many people do, most people do. But I thank you for your time and your attention. Thanks. Any questions?
Yes.
No one? But sometimes it's a good or a bad thing. Either no one's been listening or I've been very clear.
Yeah, I have a question. What do you think about using like some quantitative methods to explain and to make logic irrationality? So logic. It would be a good way to go for when you have an environment with, let's say, quantitative people, logical engineering teams and these things.
Yeah, it's not that, like, I don't want to say that data is a bad thing and logical thing, and logic in its acquirement or trying to achieve it is fantastic. It's just, you know, and particularly like with engineers, right? Engineers really think in that kind of logical way, right? It's bits and bytes. Okay, so it's really hard to convince people that there's actually a whole human being and psychological element that will contradict all the things. But what you will find, like if you think about, and this is really in the product management, I talk about this a lot in discovery, should have kind of mentioned this, that, you know, once you get usage patterns and you're looking at data and how people use your product, you know, you're seeing things happen, okay? But it's very hard to have that quantitative data at the kind of discovery element of your product, okay? But what I would suggest, like if you go out and like you do your A/B testing, you do your experimentation, you will start to get obviously that quantitative data back. But base those experiments on some of the principles I talked about here, like have like your pricing. You see people testing pricing. I've seen this so many times. And it'll be very, very small variations, because we kind of do that in UX testing, very, very small different or variations of a pricing model. Go mad. Have a really crazy high price or low or weird packaging and things like that. So that's the thing, and see what works. And then that quantitative data that comes back from that ends up being informing you. So it's not that data is bad, but I think sometimes that's what I say. Sometimes we use it too quickly. Even when I talk about we think more than we think. We'll get quantitative data. We'll do one experiment, get quantitative data, and go, that's it. That's telling me the story. I'm going to build a product. And yeah, why was the adoption low? Dig into it. Experiment again. Iterate on that as well. Because too much, we use it to support our hypothesis and not to illuminate us. Okay. It's a drunk with a lamppost.
We have an online question.
Oh yeah.
It says, nice presentation. How would you sell focusing on edge cases to other stakeholders?
That's usually not a problem, because usually you have lots of stakeholders going, why are we not building that product or why are we not building that feature? And you have to defend why we're not doing it, right? You have to say no a lot. But essentially, again, it's a return on investment question. So if I get a request in and it's from a very large customer, okay? And like if it don't, like it can't totally contradict, it can't be crazy stuff, right? Like, I'm not saying that. But if it's something small and they're saying, we need X or Y, and you quantify it, right? And you go, the effort involved in doing that is pretty low, right? And as product managers say, it doesn't matter if the effort's low, because that effort could be better spent somewhere else. So that's a return on investment. Is the effort better spent? Is the return on investment of doing something else better? All right? That can be hard to quantify as well, but that's the first question you ask. Second, you ask, what can we get in return? So if we do this for this one customer, one, builds customer relationships maybe, right? So it keeps them happy. So there's a CRM element to it. Because your product scope is beyond just building the product, right? It is, how do you keep your customers happy? How do you, alleviate those anxieties that they have? Because they're asking you this because they perceive it's a problem, even if it's not really, and you're trying to, do your product management practice and go, there's a better way of doing this, there's a workaround, there's a solve, you don't really need this. Do all that by all accounts, right? That's adding value, that's adding the consultative element to it. But sometimes, in a perfect world, a rational world, we go to a customer and have a conversation and go, you don't really need this report because here's why, you can do this and this and you don't need it, blah. And they go, thanks for explaining that to me. I really thought I needed that. I really thought that the 5 workshops I had for that we came up with that solution that we want. It's great to know that we didn't need them. There's a sunk cost in there. They'll go, thanks, I appreciate it, but I want it. That's the conversations you have. And in the great world, in the books and all product management thing, no, they'll listen to the rationality. They often won't. But can you get anything back in return? Because sometimes, a lot of the time, let's put our hands up, we've done that for nothing. Because we've gotten pressure from other stakeholders and you've done something you didn't really want to do in your product because you're pressure from stakeholders. What I'm saying, that's going to happen. Get something back. Say to the customer, okay, listen, we're going to this. I was just wondering, would you be happy to jump in a webinar with us and talk about how your experience of using our product and how it helps you solve your problems and how would you be interested in that? And so you're building that relationship with them. It helps to do it, right? Because your scope of a product manager is beyond just the, those simple things. Not simple things, right? That kind of defined boundary of building the product and doing the right things. It's the customer relationships. It's growing the business, right? It's getting that revenue. That's what you've got to think of, And I don't want, I really don't want to break or be contrary to what the best practices are. It's not conflicting. It's just augmenting those practices and sometimes having to slightly go against your principle for the greater good.
Great.
Makes sense?
We have more time for Q&A if anyone else has questions.
In the back of the room. No. You could shout.
Hello.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah. So my question is, yeah, thanks for the talk there. Pretty good. My question is regarding how to find the right balance between qualitative and quantitative research.
Sorry.
Find the right balance between the qualitative, so data, and rich insights research.
Yeah, like I would say, like I'm not going to say like it needs to be 60-40 because that just I can throw out numbers in here. But what you need to do is, I think it's kind of like the 5 whys or the first principles. It's that I start a lot of time with quantitative data. I do, like where I have it, right? Like in discovery, it can be harder, but you still do experiments and get it back. But you iterate on that, right? On the quantitative element, and then it helps you form a number of hypotheses that help to drive your qualitative research. And then your qualitative research will get you feedback in to do more experiments to get quantitative research, if that makes sense. So it's a very iterative, so you talk about Roman with his iterative strategy, it's very much the same, okay? Or you could start with the qualitative and come up with, and have your hypothesis, do your experiments, get the data back from them, qualitative. So you run around, and this is the like, in a rational world, it would be, you do it 6 times, and you come up with a magic answer, or it's 70% at 40. It's getting down to how confident are you. So a lot of it's subjective, right? How confident are we? How much is this data telling us? And are the patterns forming that indicate that this is the right thing to do as an investment? That's really where you do your quality. But I'm not suggesting by any means, I don't want to, that qualitative or quantitative data is not, quantitative data is incredibly important. In certain organizations, you weigh more of it than qualitative. And in probably a lot of our organizations, we have more quantitative data than qualitative, because we like to say we go out and talk to customers, like 10 customers a day. Do we? Right? Getting access to customers. So you have what to do. Just try drive a healthy balance of qualitative data over that quantitative, because it is that leaning, that lamppost quantitative data. And it's easy to, it's kind of a CYA, type of thing. Like, the data told me. Look at the data. So why is adoption low? Why is revenue not meeting targets? Well, the data said it should. The quantitative, go out, get validation, make sure you don't have to use your quantitative data for that CYA, that you get that adoption. So that's kind of, it's, probably not a good answer, but I wouldn't say 70, or I wouldn't say that. It's just iterate until you're pretty sure, right? And we don't have all day, we don't have forever to iterate, but ensure you have experiments, ensure you experiment, and do a number of it, as many as you can. Matters. Do people do experimentation? Like, I know it's a big thing, like, and I think somebody's talking about this. Is there experimentation talk on? Yeah. Don't feel like, oh, I have to raise my hand, because I see a lot of people not doing experimentation. It's something that I really see as a big problem with product management. We don't experiment. It can be hard to do. When you get doing it, you'll never not do it. It's just, and it becomes easy. So I advise anybody with experimentation, go to it, learn to experiment, keep doing it, because it is how you find out the quirks. And it's real fun, because you find out these type of weird stuff, that people are doing things that you'd never expect. Jana?
Hey, love the talk. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
So I really believe in experimentation, but how do you go about experimenting with pricing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I'm lucky enough lucky and unlucky. In AWS, we have actual partner groups, design partner groups. So I have a number of customers that I kind of shepherd together, and I use them. And we have a lot of customers, and we do design partner groups, and we do it for UX experimentation. We do it for all experimentation, and I'll do it on pricing. And we'll give it out a thing going, here's a product, and they'll get to beta it and things like that. And I basically cohort them. And so generally there's about 40 in each design group, and we'll do it in 10s, and I'll put different pricing models for each 10 on their beta and ask them and get feedback. I'll do that probably 3 times, so that's 120 customers in 3. Now, I'm lucky, we've 250,000 customers using my service. That's great. People don't have that luxury to do it, but the thing is that when you do it in a smaller group, you can iterate your pricing as well. So you can put it out there, like with your press release and your pricing, right? And see and you can generally get feedback on that. So you go to customers and say, here's our pricing model, right? Put it in front of customers. Just go and talk with 5 customers, and it doesn't have to be public, and just go, but for all intents and purposes, it is what you're going public with, and say, here's a price, well, what do you think? And you will get, at least, you will get like that look. And we have a really good UX guy who's big into like testing everything, and for pricing, he does the testing and the video, and he actually, like, it's so funny when you see people's faces sometimes when they see a pricing, and they're like, yeah, that's interesting. That's valuable. Like, as much as that is really valuable. Like, particularly to UX people, they'll come back and go, the body language didn't match what was saying. That's what I say, what people say, their body language, what they do, how they act, it often doesn't match. And it's not that difficult to see that. Testing with pricing, I have a luxury with that, but it's not easy for everybody. But experimenting across the board is, but you can do it. I think there's, we use an in-house tool, but there is a tool for price testing and content testing. I'm sure I can't remember what it is that I used to use. I can't remember. But anyway, none of this is easy, right? Product management. None of it is. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it and all that. But it's tough. But it is worth its weight, because I've built products on the whole irrationalities thing that flopped, right? Built features that didn't get adoption, and like the data said it would, and everyone said it would, and the customers loved it and stuff like that, and we're all excited. And then we looked at the adoption and the revenue. That's a horrible place to be. If you can get ahead of that, understanding the heuristics that drive people, motivate people to use, understand experimentation and doing it and investing in that, I can guarantee you that feeling will be a lot better in the end, and you will build better products or stop building bad products.
Helpful answer, thank you.
Cheers.
How are you doing? Thanks very much for the talk. I just want to ask you, have you seen an increase in customers asking for data, in the sense of, like, so for example, you're saying customers make decisions based on sort of irrational things.
Yeah.
But often I find the space we're in education, we're seeing a move towards clients actually saying, we want to make data-driven decisions.
Yeah.
We want, so like when we, what they're looking for in the product is, can you tell me by how much this will, increase whatever workload or decrease workload or time or whatever. So is there a way to kind of balance how you focus your product on kind of helping them make data-driven decisions, but then at the same time kind of aim towards their motivators, which mightn't actually be data-driven?
Yeah, I don't want to seem facetious, but if a customer wants data-driven decisions, give them data. They'll make the same irrational decisions based on that simple data. I'm just saying, like, it's your job to educate. Without being, but that's, so say for instance, customer says, this will change, like, how will your product change my life? And you've got data to go, 50% of the customer or 95% of the customers adopt this thing. If they apply these best practices based on the data, they'll increase their KPI, whatever that is, if it's revenue, retention, whatever it is, if it's people going to class, right, by 2%. And they go, that's brilliant. I made a decision. So I made a decision to adopt that base. Or if you apply this curriculum, or if you add this, I don't know, I'm just speculating, but if you apply this module to the class, it will increase by 3%, because look, the data tells you. That's fine. If they wouldn't do that and trust that data, but they'll probably find the same problem you would have as a product manager, that they've done that and they haven't got that 3%. Right? So, how accurate is your product? Do they trust it? The accuracy of your data. Now, I'm not saying some data is that simple. It's that I move this lever and this happens, right? There's a psychological, it's a math fallacy. So if you put math in front of a customer, right, and say this model does this, or in front of a human being, they believe it much more than they would like an anecdote, right? So it doesn't matter if that's absolutely made up model. Doesn't matter. I'm not saying do this, but they will. There's a math fallacy. People just the math. I say math because I deal with Americans all the time. I'd say the Americans, we call it maths because we do it twice, or we do it more than once. Anyway, but the you know what I mean? Like it's if a customer wants to live by just being that data, then they're being irrational. They're trying to aim for rationality, but it's a fallacy. They're not really going to achieve it. So how does your product? In most cases, in certain cases, it does, right? You do this and X, Y. But so the maths fallacy. So a lot of people like for instance, I used to work for a company. It was in sales methodology, and they had this equation that if you plug your pipeline and your sales cycle and all this in, it outputted like you could change the levers and it will tell you your optimal deal size and your all that. bullshit. It sold the product. It was, everyone loved it. Everyone, I mean, they say, oh yeah, equation, look at the equation. And sales managers are going in, our deal size are too big. You need to make it small, you know. Crazy. So people like the Matt Valley. So like if you're trying to drive customers to data, if they want data-driven decisions, like if that's what they really need, you can give them a data platform. I'm not saying you're adding value, but that's what I'm saying about anxieties, right? This is the irrational. You're taking the needs. They don't need that. They need to grow revenue. But if they're kind of thinking, no, because you know, I'm real anxious about making a data-driven decision because that's where we're going. It's data-driven. That's what customers. I'm not. You know, it might sound facetious, but it is a fallacy to do it. I'm not. Again, I sound like I'm saying data is horrendous. That's really good if they can model it and it informs them. And it helps what I said, informs them, and illuminates and gets them to maybe experiment with this module and that module, and but to just take it as gospel, you know, for a data-driven decision. That's what happens with product managers thinking, we take it as this gospel, like the data says it. Doesn't work out like that, you know. Too many complexities. So.
Okay. Thanks so much.
I'm kind of depressed, people. Sorry, thanks, folks.
Thank you very much.